Hi, I'm Xander Snyder, and this is First American's Inside Look. Scalable, remotely accessible generative AI is changing the way that we work. But running large language models like ChatGPT is costly in terms of computational requirements. And usually that computing happens in data centers. Now, data centers are large, custom-built commercial properties that share many similarities to critical infrastructure in terms of operating requirements. For example, they must be supplied with a substantial quantity of electricity and water, and they require extensive technical competency to build and maintain. Recently, a new large language model called DeepSeek was released that was supposedly trained at a fraction of the cost and with much smaller electricity requirements than existing models. And as a result, many have speculated that this will negatively impact demand for data centers, demand to lease data centers in the future, since, as the argument goes, less data center capacity will be required to manage these new, more efficient models. But it's still too early to know whether that's the case. It's not uncommon for new technologies to become more efficient and thereby spur broader adoption of them. And when this happens, it often increases the net demand for that technology because it is now cheaper and easier to access. In economics, this phenomenon is common enough to have a name: Jevon's paradox. Named after a 19th century economist, Jevon's paradox describes a situation when a more efficient technology leads to an overall increase in demand. It was originally used to describe how a new, more efficient type of steam engine resulted in increasing demand for coal. However, the same concept could just as easily apply to generative AI and computing capacity today. As a result, I'd argue that more efficient LLMs, large language models, could just as easily increase as decrease future demand for data center capacity. However, the general push towards broader adoption of generative AI will, I think, be a net positive contribution towards future data center demand. Interested in learning more about data center fundamentals? Check out my recent blog post on the First American Economics Center. It's called Why DeepSeek May Signal Greater Data Center Demand, Not Less. Now, in this video, I've talked primarily about the demand side of data centers, but in that blog post, I also talk about the meaningful constraints to new data center supply. Be sure to check it out. I'll be giving a talk at the regional ICSC conference in Columbus, Ohio on March 7th. If you're attending, I hope to see you there. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights. See you next time.